Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 223 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about motivation, which is one of the critical challenges for leaders. Can they motivate their people to get the best out of them and have their people feel good about coming to work every day? Well, I think you can, but it may require some trial and error, which we'll talk about in this episode as well. But I'm also going to introduce you to 3 levers that you can pull based on some recent research that might help you to motivate your team. Let's get into the episode right now. So if you need some ideas on how to motivate your people, you're not alone. This is a very common leadership challenge. And if we could simply find that one silver bullet way to motivate everyone, we would be on easy street for sure. Of course, we know that everyone is different, so we can't motivate everyone the same way. And even in people in general may be motivated by similar factors. After all, we are all human. The specific motivators will still differ from person to person. So in this episode, I'm going to cover a few motivational levers that you might try pulling to get the best out of your team. Now, when it comes to motivation, some people believe that they have to do something to other people to motivate them. But this actually takes the responsibility out of their hands. If I want to be motivated, is it my manager's responsibility to motivate me? Or do I have to find ways to motivate myself as well? So I find it useful to think about motivation in 2 directions. Firstly, leaders need to create an environment where the conditions are right for people to feel motivated. Then it's up to the team member to come to the party and use that environment to find their motivation instead of sitting there passively saying, "Motivate me." Otherwise, leaders can fall into the trap of feeling like they need to be running around spending all their energy motivating their people, and this is tiring and takes some of the personal accountability away from that team member. Motivation really matters because most people can learn new skills, but not everyone can apply them with vigor to get great results. So we can think of performance using the equation performance equals motivation times ability. So it's a useful way to think about performance because it means that we can have all the ability in the world, but if we have no motivation, we're going to get very low performance. And conversely, if we have very high motivation but not much ability, we'll get low performance as well. So you want to maximize the motivation and maximize the ability to get the greatest performance. So it's a simple way of thinking about it, but it's quite a useful way in my opinion. And there's a related podcast episode number 71 with a simple model for team motivation. I'd urge you to check that one out as well. You can find the links to this episode as usual on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/223. And on that page, you can apply for a complimentary coaching session with me if you think I can help you with some of your leadership challenges. So when it comes to motivation, I think it's useful to think of ourselves as scientists in the workplace. So I'm not saying you need to do years of research to be able to lead your team effectively. What I mean is that we should create a hypothesis about what we think could motivate our team members and then test it out. Because you will never know until you try. As I spoke about before, there is no one silver bullet solution to motivation. So a quick online dictionary search tells us that a hypothesis is a supposition or proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. So in other words, we get to know our people with their strengths, weaknesses, and personalities, and then we think about ideas about what might help them feel more motivated based on the limited amount of knowledge we have about our people. So essentially, we're making a bit of an educated guess on what we think might be behind a lack of motivation for our team members, or maybe we're just not seeing the effort which we think we should be seeing, and then we try to tweak a few factors. And we don't need to have the exact answers, but we need to have something to try. And if it doesn't work, we can always try something else. We want to prove or disprove our hypothesis to see what works and what doesn't. Now, the good news when it comes to motivation is that I find even slight tweaks can cause an improvement, so you can tinker and adjust the conditions and the work in your team to see what might work for your people. And as an example, you might think, well, Bob's looking pretty listless. He's not really performing the way I need him to, but I think he's got good skills. So what's behind that? And you might think, well, lately he's been working on a few boring projects that I think he's finding too easy. So maybe let's give him a challenging task to do that he'll have to really stretch himself for. So that could be your hypothesis. Your hypothesis in this case would be Bob is not motivated because he's not being challenged enough. So then you test that out by giving him a challenging work assignment and just monitoring his behavior and performance and his attitude and seeing what sort of result you get from that. If that turns out not to be a motivating factor for Bob, then you can think about something else. So now let's look at some of the factors that we can potentially use to motivate our people. They might not all work, but we can try them out and see where you notice any improvements. And the first one is, I've spoken about this one before a few times, providing more autonomy. Now this one sounds pretty obvious, but many leaders are hesitant to do this. Now why is that? Because providing more autonomy or freedom for your team to do their best work can feel uncomfortable. They may make mistakes or go off on the wrong track, which can feel quite risky. However, greater autonomy is one of the motivating factors referenced in a number of motivation theories, including the job characteristics model, which I'll link to in the show notes page, as well as Dan Pink's more recent motivation theory in the book Drive, and I'll reference both of those things in the show notes page. So we should try to allow more autonomy for our people where we can. So you can provide more autonomy by having someone make decisions about how they do their work rather than telling them exactly what to do, or you could let people decide the order or the sequence about how they complete their work. You could also provide people more flexibility about when or where they do the work, or have people decide the priority of their tasks. So start small if you're nervous about providing more autonomy. Choose a small aspect of the work that you could let go of or provide them more control of. And over time, you'll hopefully grow more comfortable, which could lead to greater levels of autonomy for your team. And for more on this specific topic, I'd recommend you reading a previous article of mine, 4 Ways to Provide Autonomy for Your People, which goes in a little more detail on how to provide this autonomy. That will be in the show notes page as well, thoughtleader.com/223. So the second thing you can do is provide varied work opportunities. Now you'd probably get bored if you did the same thing at work every day. So do your team. So many people like to develop their skills in different areas that they care about, especially if it could lead to further career opportunities in the long run. So Daniel Pink once again refers to this concept as mastery when it comes to motivation. So could you harness this factor in your team? To provide varied work opportunities, you might try finding out what your people are interested in and what they'd like to accomplish in their career over the longer term. You could work with your team to identify improvements that can be made, which can be used as side projects. Or you can have your people get involved in initiatives running within your workplace that are outside of their regular role, such as projects. A lot of organizations have a lot of change going on, and there's projects that people can get involved in. Those can be great opportunities to give people some different skills to master. Or lastly, you could delegate work from your own role, which can help your people learn to step up into a leadership position in the future. So reading these points may make you feel uncomfortable because you may be thinking that you don't have capacity to let your people try anything else other than work in their current roles. Is it possible though that you could have them spend a portion of their time on improvement opportunities or side projects rather than their whole working day? So Google obviously does this. Companies like Atlassian also do this. They allow time for their people to work on their own personal projects that eventually might become new Google products in Google's example. So you never know, you might find the additional opportunities give them a burst of motivation that they can bring into their regular work too. And I've always found that side projects are a really important way to motivate people because they give people a bit of variety in their work, they get to learn new skills, but most importantly, these side projects also involve improving the team itself. So it's not just about your team members working on fun stuff in their spare time, it's also about improving the team, so you're getting a double benefit here. And you can learn more about this in a related article about how to provide development opportunities for your team. That'll be in the show notes page too. So the third lever I'm going to talk about here is providing greater accountability. Sometimes we may think that our team members want to shy away from accountability. They'd rather just cruise through the workday. However, delegating greater levels of accountability to your team members can be motivating. Firstly, greater accountability can help people feel as if they are playing a greater part in the success of the team. It can also help people develop new skills or experience in leadership. So once again, in Dan Pink's motivation model, One of the factors he says leads to greater motivation is a sense of purpose. Greater levels of accountability can lead to a stronger sense of purpose. And once again, if this makes you feel a little uncomfortable, I'd consider starting small. Could you perhaps give people greater accountability for a function of your team? For example, if you have a set of processes and procedures, you could delegate accountability for keeping them up to date and current to an interested and skilled team member. If a certain software application is important for your team, could you delegate accountability for making sure it is kept up to date and identifying improvements or ensuring that everyone knows how to use it? You might even start smaller by delegating at a lower level. For example, a team member may attend a management meeting in your place if you're unable to make it one day. So there's lots of options you could try, and starting small will help you to feel more comfortable letting go. And sometimes when I run training courses, we propose these sort of things and we talk about motivation models, and I'll hear some leaders in the room say, "Oh no, that would never work in my team." And I'm interested when people say that because they sort of count out the possibility that it'll work without even giving it a go. So you might perceive one of your team members, for example, as, lacking in experience or capability, or just someone who doesn't care about work. But you might be surprised how much they start to care about work if they're given a little more opportunity and accountability or autonomy as part of their role. One thing you might be thinking here is, well, what about money? Money is surely the best motivator around. Well, some of the research has suggested that money is known, or salary is known, as a hygiene factor. So what a hygiene factor is, it's something that if it's not present, you'll see low motivation, but if you have more of it, it doesn't necessarily make people work harder or feel more engaged. So think about if you were getting paid a huge salary. Over time, what tends to happen is you start to think less about that salary. You generally don't come to work every day thinking, "Oh my goodness, I feel so motivated because of my salary." That sort of enthusiasm passes over time. The exception might be a performance-based bonus, which can have you striving harder to hit a certain target, but that's different than a salary, for example. Another thing I will note here is that these motivation factors that I've mentioned today, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, are only really valid if these hygiene factors, as I mentioned, are in place. So for example, if your people consider themselves to be underpaid or working in terrible working conditions or unpleasant or unsafe conditions, for example, then these motivational factors that I'm mentioning today are unlikely to work. So what you need to do is make sure these hygiene factors, such as your basics, such as a nice working environment, reasonable salary, you make sure they are catered for and satisfied. And then these extra motivators, purpose, autonomy, and mastery, will actually be able to have an impact. Think about the people and the work in your team. What could you tweak or adjust to try to help people feel more motivated in the areas of autonomy, mastery, and purpose? Start small to grow your trust levels and come up with a motivation hypothesis that you can test out with your people. You never know what your experiment might reveal about yourself and the people you lead. Let me know in the show notes page comments, what are you going to try to improve motivation in your team? What are some of the factors you can tweak? I'd love to get your thoughts on that and hear what some of your ideas are. Any success stories would also be good, so put them in the show notes page too. Okay, thank you once again for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy the podcast or this episode, I would love you to leave a positive review on your favorite podcast app of choice. It really helps me get the word out. So thank you in advance. Take care of yourselves, take care of your team, see if you can tweak some factors and motivate your people, and I'll be back next week.